Well, hey folks, Real Honesty with Jeremy Lynn. I'm Jeremy Lynn. This is my review of the Andre the Giant HBO special, which I highly recommend you guys go watch. If you have HBO, hopefully you DVR'd it or find a replay of it. Otherwise, find a friend who has HBO, find a way to get a trial of HBO so you can watch it. Find any way to watch this however you can. I mean, obviously through legal methods, I would recommend that you try to support HBO by, doing that because it's really worth it. It is a really, really good documentary. It's not as deep as I would have liked. It's probably on par with about the Ric Flair 30 for 30 special they had on ESPN, which I did a review of months ago. I mean, you would probably have to go through my pay per view reviews or other reviews to find it. But I would recommend that you guys go check that out. There are a few things that you might find out that you didn't know, especially with Andre, though. For those of you that did not grow up in his during his prime, if you're like me, I know I am, then you probably only saw him in his WWF days, even WWF days, where he was more broken down. He was used mainly as a giant. He wasn't doing all the athletic stuff that he did in Montreal and France and the Carolinas, Mid South, and that kind of stuff. He was a huge, huge attraction. I'm not going to go over every single aspect. I would recommend you guys go watch this right away as soon as you can. It did have a great opening package, talking, with narration talking about Andre's career and stuff like that, showing various clips. They interviewed some members of his family that are still alive, like his brothers. That was really, really cool. It really dived into the very beginning and how he started out in wrestling, how he started out in France, and how lanky he was, but how tall he was, and how just freakishly large he was. And that's not an insult. The man literally was larger than life. I mean, he was pretty much the first of his kind, especially in wrestling. Now, obviously, I'm sure that there were others that suffered from, I believe, acromegaly. I believe I got that right, the giantism disease. But he was the first to really transcend and show, hey, if you're in wrestling, you actually can be a big star too. There was nobody like him. There also weren't about 10,000 cable channels that overexposed him. He was used as an attraction. From the time in France to Japan, I wish they had shown a little more of his time in Japan. In fact, I'm a little disappointed they didn't. I don't know if they weren't able to get rights to the footage or what, but it still would have been nice to see more of his time in Japan. He worked as a heel primarily. A lot of American wrestlers did, but it would have been great to see some of that stuff. They showed a little bit, and they did. Obviously the Japanese fans still respected him for being as big as he was and everything, for being such a massive human being and such a huge draw for so many people. But it's just a shame they didn't show more of it. They did show, of course, his time in Montreal, where he was a giant that spoke French. I mean, how could the men have not loved him? Say this is a guy we can look up to. How could the ladies have not loved him? I mean, Ric Flair even said at one point he had a 24, he had a size 24 shoe and it has a 24 shoe. What else do you want me to say? And I'm like, oh God, Rick, you pervy old man. Who he's kind of always been a pervy old man, even when he was 40. But Flair got to interview Gene Okerlund, Shane, Jerry Lawler, some various other people, Tim White. Arnold Schwarzenegger even had a little piece. They did talk to Andre the Giant's daughter at one point. They did talk to Hogan and Vince, and for a while, especially about halfway through, or more towards about 2/3 through, this really started to become more the Hogan Vince show, talking about the expansion of WWE. But one thing I did like is that they talked about how Andre was used as an attraction, like in AWA, Mid South, and that kind of stuff, and how Vince Sr. and Andre were particularly close, and they had a really good relationship. And Vince Sr. would loan him out to various territories to give them a boost, and also to give Andre some more exposure. Like, hey, oh, this guy was here. This guy was here in this company. He's loaned out from this company. We need to go check this out also and see what else Andre can do and see what else they do. And it would draw eyeballs to various territories. There was a journalist at one point that compared Andre's hands to the size of a lowland gorilla, and pretty damn accurate according to the specs, which is a little frightening to think that a guy with hands that big, that was as big as he was, but hands that big especially, could wrestle you and could beat you to hell if he wanted to. I mean, Andre was good in the ring to the guys he liked. If he didn't like you, guys like Big John Studd, um, Big John Studd, Iron Sheik, Randy Savage. They delve into the reason that he didn't like Randy Savage, which, and this is what I heard, so I don't know how true this is, heard in interviews, The reason Andre didn't get along with Savage is because he caught Savage using steroids, or found that Savage had steroids in his possession. At least I believe that was the reason. I mean, if that isn't the reason, then I greatly apologize. But Andre didn't like who he didn't like, or when he didn't like you, that was pretty much the reason. They did talk to Dave Meltzer also. I mean, we can all have our opinions on Meltzer. Maybe I'll do my own piece at some point on that, but it's not great. It's not great to hear from Meltzer. In small doses, it is. But he's a fan just like everybody. Maybe he's an informed fan, but he's still a fan just like all others that aren't actually in the business. They did talk a whole lot about how travel was tough for Andre, and it had to have been for a guy that was over 7 feet tall, and even at his biggest, like 500 something pounds, that must have been tough. Even for a guy that was over 7 feet and 400 pounds, stuff wasn't built for a man like Andre. I mean, even back then, but Andre was seen as a much, bigger, much bigger human being and everything. He was just so massive that what else could people do other than point? And that was the unfortunate thing about it, is how much he was made fun of. Now, there were people, obviously, that respected him, but they always wanted pictures. They always wanted this, and they would always make comments. It's a shame that Andre got picked on like he did, or shown, hey, look at that freak of nature, which I would say freak of nature in a nice way, because the guy was still a human being. He was just a massive human being, and somebody who went through a whole lot. I mean, they talked about his legendary drinking, and how he could basically outdrink anybody, and he would get tipsy, but he would never get drunk. He bought a ranch in in a little town in North Carolina, where it reminded him of being at home back in France. Injuries started to pile up in the 80s, obviously, as anything would. His condition, his acromegaly, according to a doctor, could be treatable, but it wasn't reversible. Unlike Big Show, like where Big Show, I think they could remove the overactive pituitary gland and everything, and give him a longer life. Andre couldn't get that. This might have helped Andre's career, or might have helped him live longer, but who knows? It's really hard to say, because medical science has advanced so much. Andre was unfortunately given a very, very short shelf life from an early day, from like an early age and everything. Like, I mean, I think he really started to grow around the time he was 12 or 15, I believe is what they said. Like I said, about 2/3 through, they talked about Vince's expansion and everything, and taking the territories, taking the territory system out, as he took his own promotion national. And they talked so much about Hogan as well. I mean, my God, it's like they forgot about Andre for about 10 minutes. I mean, I don't know, maybe it wasn't 10 minutes, maybe it just seemed like it. They talked about Mania. They briefly talked about Mania 1, and Andre was a part of that, but they glossed over the thing, because Andre was in a $15,000 body slam challenge with Big John Studd. Yes, Andre was starting to slow down incredibly at this point, which was really sad. They talked about the Princess Bride stuff with director Rob Reiner, Billy Crystal, Carrie Ells, I always get that name right, Elwes, Robin Wright, who talked about, how Andre put his hand over her head when they were really, really cold, and he kept her head warm. I really wish we could have heard a little bit more about the Princess Bride, and I believe there's a documentary on one of the Blu-ray releases, the Princess Bride, one of the Princess Bride releases, maybe even the most recent one, where Andre the Giant, they have more footage with him. He seemed like he would have been a joy on set, even with the pain he was in, and the fact that he was just so massive. But apparently he loved being on the set, and he was perfect for that. Andre the Giant probably had one of the best roles of any wrestler in a movie ever. Fight me on that, because that's what I feel. He was perfect in it. I mean, obviously you need captions to understand what Andre's saying, but Andre spoke volumes, whether his English is great or not, and whether his voice is so booming or not. It was kind of funny how they built for Mania 3, and Andre was so beat up, and I mean so beat up. His back was beat up and stuff like that, and they had to give him time off so he could get more surgery for things, but he got a surgical procedure done so he could basically get through that. I think he had a back brace on underneath his singlet, and he drank so much just to get through that. But they talked to Hogan in a little interview piece, and Hogan sat down with Vince and wrote out the entire match, and then Vince took that, I believe, and went to Andre. But Andre kept Hogan in the dark or whatever, even though Andre was always good about doing business. Again, if he didn't like you, he could do whatever. But Andre did exactly what he needed to do, talking about Mania 3. Did exactly what he needed to do. Everything that Hogan wrote out, Andre, it hid Andre's weaknesses, which were many, and played to his strengths, which was his size and his intimidating presence. But if you watch that match, it's just, even as 6-year-old me, it was so sad to see. I knew at 6 years old that Andre was not doing well. I could tell. I mean, even at 6 years old, I'm like watching, I'm like, oh, Andre just doesn't look good. He looks so beat up and everything. And then it gets into uncomfortable territory. I mean, Andre talked about how he knew he wasn't going to live. I mean, people talked about how Andre talked about how he wasn't going to live long. He did have some good audio clips with him, especially earlier in his career, and I really like that. But Vince, and it skips ahead a few years because Andre really didn't do much of anything of note beyond the big event in 1988. His health was so bad he primarily worked in tag teams, or if he worked singles, they weren't very long because he couldn't do anything. And that's not a knock against him. His health was just so bad. But then Vince, they talk about how Vince talked about how Andre, couldn't wrestle anymore. I think pretty much after Mania 6, he wrestled a little bit, but then that was about it. Vince says that Andre resented him for the business going on without him. Vince basically admitted that he used Andre probably past the point where he should have. Without actually saying that, that's pretty much what he said. This may be where you start to resent Vince a little bit more. Those that already resent Vince, you might resent him a little bit more here. But he knew how much Andre was hurting, and that Andre probably shouldn't have been wrestling at WrestleMania 3. He didn't necessarily force him, but he kind of played to his pride, and like, hey, Andre, if you want to do this, you'll do this way. You're the boss. Put this guy over, essentially. But you can't tell Andre to put somebody over. If Andre doesn't want to, he won't. But it gets sad towards the end, obviously, because it talks about his death. And I'm going to try not to cry about this, but I remember vividly at 12 years old. I had just turned 12 like a couple weeks before Andre the Giant passing away. And it was flooring because I know I hadn't seen him on TV much. But you just think with Andre, even with the condition he was in, you would think that he wouldn't die. This man was unbeatable. He was a giant. He was a fairy tale come to life. And he was there for his father's death, and then he died soon after. He was back in France. And various people talked about him, talked about his life and stuff like that, and talked about the memories that he left, and his career and his life and stuff like that. It was a good documentary. The problem is it was only like 85 minutes. I felt they could have almost made this 2 hours. I also want to point out that Vince doesn't seem genuine when he cries or attempts to cry. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Vince didn't come across. Sometimes he came across genuine, other times he didn't. But whatever. That's neither here nor there. This is a celebration of Andre. It did talk about the injuries he had and how beat up he was. Do I recommend you guys watch this? Yes. This is a nice little way to encompass the entire show. But I recommend you guys watch it because I can't cover every single detail they go into here. But it is really, really good. And I highly recommend you watch it. So anyway, that's what I got to say. Do you agree, disagree with what I said? Like, share, comment, subscribe. Twitter link in the description. It's been Real Honesty with Jar Mifflin. I'm Jar Mifflin, and I will see you soon.